Igor is desperate for news of his great-grandmother, whose body is believed to be under the rubble of her destroyed home. The apartment block she lived in was hit by what the Ukrainian army says was a Russian missile in an attack on the western Ukrainian city of Ternopil that killed and injured dozens of people on Wednesday morning.
My great-grandmother is still under the rubble, and I still hope to find at least her body to fulfill her last will and bury her next to grandfather.
Meanwhile, top Pentagon officials, including U.S. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll, have been meeting Ukrainian officials, including Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal, in Kyiv. The meetings come amid media reports the U.S. and Russia have prepared a peace proposal in secret talks following a summit in Alaska between U.S. President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in August. The proposal is reported to involve Kyiv having to make major territorial and military concessions. These include Ukraine ceding control of the entire eastern Donbass region, including areas still under Ukrainian control. Ukraine would maintain legal ownership of the territory. Russia would pay a rental fee for keeping control of it. The proposal also reportedly includes Kyiv reducing the size of its army, as well as blocking the deployment of foreign troops in the country and banning it from possessing long-range missiles. EU leaders meeting in Brussels say any peace negotiations cannot sideline Ukraine and must involve Europe.
No, we have not been involved. I don't know what the involvement of Ukraine has been in this plan, but obviously for us it is important that whatever peace plan is on the table, that Ukraine is behind it. This is up to Ukraine. It's about Ukrainian territory. It's about Ukrainian sovereignty. So without a buy-in of Ukraine, you won't get the support of the Europeans.
Ukrainians asked about the reported proposal said it was unacceptable and has considerable political ramifications for the Ukrainian president.
I don't consider these conditions acceptable, and I don't think that even if such agreement is conditionally reached at the level of heads of state, that it will be accepted by the people, by the military, and those who have already given and are giving so much of their lives.
President Vladimir Zelenskyy has been in Turkey for talks he said were aimed at reinvigorating peace negotiations. But he's under growing domestic and international scrutiny following a corruption scandal that's forced him to sack the justice and energy ministers and impose sanctions on close associates. Investigators found that $100 million had been embezzled from the energy sector through kickbacks paid by contractors. The scandal has angered many in Ukraine, especially as the country faces regular power cuts because of Russia targeting energy infrastructure, attacks that often result in the loss of many civilian lives. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
Audrey Macalpine is a freelance journalist. She's joining us now from Kyiv. Thanks very much indeed for being with us, Audrey. I want to ask you about these attacks in Lviv and Ternopil particularly. Initially, they are both right on the border with Poland, and we know that there has been a rise in tensions between Poland and Russia particularly. How much of these attacks are about Russia, as it says, responding to attacks by Ukraine, and how much of it is a testing, if you like, of the response times of EU and NATO countries?
Well, Rob, we have seen an increase in strikes leading into the winter, which many believe this latest attack on areas like Ternopil and Western Ukraine was the result of. We know also a few days ago that for the first time, Ukraine openly claimed that it used U.S.-supplied ATACMS to strike targets within Russia. So some might allege that this is a direct response to that. But Russia has said that it intended to target infrastructure, energy infrastructure in particular. We also know that overnight there were some Russian drone incursions alleged into areas like Poland and Romania. But it's widely believed, at least here, that this is a continuation of those energy strikes that we've seen ramping up since earlier this fall.
We've also seen an increase in Russian attacks, particularly when there are negotiations going on about peace. We know that the US is now pushing a 28-point plan from the Trump administration. There's a certain amount of speculation about whether or not the Ukrainians have actually been involved in this, whether or not they've been been part of those negotiations. Are we any clearer about whether or not Ukraine has been within these talks?
Well, in a report from Axios that came out yesterday says that the Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev and Witkoff met in Miami at the end of October. They spent 3 days allegedly poring over this peace plan. Ukraine Defense Minister Umerov at the time was on the sidelines of that in Miami, meeting separately with Witkoff, but not with the Russian envoy in that regard. Now, this plan, though, does seem to be mostly hatched between the United States and Russia. We know yesterday when the Ukrainian president was in Turkey, in Ankara, he was meant to perhaps meet with Witkoff, but that plan was called off because the Ukrainian president wanted to involve his European counterparts. So this is a sort of increased effort by Zelenskyy to include Europe in these discussions, while the U.S. has preferred to involve Qatar, for example, versus his European counterparts. So it seems that we're still very much far apart. Zelenskyy has said that he does not fully agree with this 28-point peace plan that's been proposed, probably most likely having to do with the areas of these debated territories in eastern Ukraine, namely the Donbass. So it'll be interesting to see over the next few days, once that plan is officially proposed, how Ukraine will respond.
So you say the President Zelenskyy says that he's not happy with certain parts of that plan. How do the Ukrainian people feel about this, particularly if it did lead to a plan where a significant proportion of their country is going to be given over to Russia?
Well, earlier this week, I spoke with one soldier who's currently fighting in the Pokrovsk direction, one of the most heated battles of the war right now. And I asked him, would you be willing to give up the Donetsk region in turn for peace? And he said yes. However, I speak to people here on the streets in Kyiv, and they say that even though it's possible that they might lose this territory in battles, that they just can't find it within themselves to willingly give it up. So I think that question is a very sensitive one among Ukrainians and still very much divided amongst the population here.
Yeah, Audrey, thank you very much just for giving us that insight into what the Ukrainians are doing in terms of reacting to what's going on. Audrey Macalpine, thank you very much indeed.
Don't miss out, get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.